This webinar is being hosted by CCCD as part of an ongoing educational series called Promoting Shared Wisdom Through Cooperative Connections, which is aimed at supporting the most pressing needs of cooperators and support organizations. So keep an eye out for more webinars in the months ahead. For those not familiar with CCCD, we are a statewide nonprofit based in Northern California, been running for about 12 years. We support all sectors of co-ops across the state with startup management and other technical assistance. And we are also an educational entity. So we are not only working with co-ops and partners and supporters, but also the public at large through events and trainings, conferences, and informational literature. Without further ado, though, I am thrilled to pass it off to the reason you're all here, which is Sassy. She has been a longtime partner and friend of CCCD. She took part in launching our California Co-op Conference and has come back each year to share her expertise and energy with cooperators. So we're extremely grateful that she is here with us today. So Sassy, I am going to hand it over to you now and make you the host. And if you could please make me a co-host once you receive this.
I shall do that. Yeah, as soon as I'm gonna look for that to pop up so that I can, yes, put us into breakout rooms, and I'm gonna toss the ball back to you as well, so that you can share in and support each other, because there's that principle 6, cooperation among cooperators. We're super into that here. And you are, yes, you're currently that one. I'm going to make you co-host. Excellent. Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. So many worlds colliding, so many gorgeous faces. Some of you have taken a lot of my classes before. Some of you have no idea what's about to happen. I'm super excited for all of that. So welcome, welcome. I'm going to be bouncing between having a few slides for those of you who are visual learners and just staying in this kind of, I get to see your faces, you get to see my faces space. And there's a couple of different ways you can also do that with the video. I'm going to do a lot of different kind of tips and tricks. Those of you that have taken my classes before know that I like to, especially in a small time amount, we do things meta. So everything that we're learning, we're also doing. So this is the way that I would, for example, if I were in a cooperative and doing distributed communication, we would be doing things kind of like this. So if you ever have a question about the content of what we're doing or the process and the meta of what we're doing, those are all of that's up for discussion. So again, if questions arise for you that are clarifying questions, please throw those in the chat. If there are kind of bigger questions that you're like, oh, how would I apply this to this? Or I have a situation, how might this work for that? Also do throw those in the chat, and we're going to make sure we collect and harvest those larger questions for our Q&A time and trouble solving at the end. Those clarifying questions I'll try and get to as we go along. So really quickly, I'm going to share my screen. So you should be able to see, oh dear, here we go. Somebody, let me escape and do that again. We're gonna try that one more time. Somebody give me a thumbs up if you can see a slide deck that says cooperative communication, magic. We're gonna click present. It's gonna fail, or it's gonna succeed in a very different way. Huh, magic. All right, we're gonna go through it like this. So we have our shared screen, we have this, and we have our chat. I want to make sure that I can also see what you're doing. And I'm a really big fan of modeling what we're doing as we go, so you can see everything that I'm doing to know, hey, as a facilitator, it's a good idea to have a couple of screens so you can do these things. So now that we're in shared screen, before I actually get into the actual conversation, first off, who the heck am I and why the heck am I here talking to y'all? As Gianna mentioned, I'm a longtime fan and supporter of the cooperative, the CCCD, and co-ops in general. Lifelong co-opper here, lived and worked in different cooperatives since I was about 3 years old. So for me, the democratic way of life is normal. It's all of everybody else who's kind of crazy. So this is a world where cooperative communication and the lessons learned therein are really actually widely applicable to a whole host of different ways of being. Organizations, businesses, life, community, neighborhoods, all sorts of things. These are really applicable skills, and that's my passion. So I'm just super here for helping and supporting cooperative communication in people's lives, wherever that may be. We are a little bit focused today on specifically organizations. Perhaps that's a community building group, perhaps that's a business, perhaps that's your shared cooperative, perhaps that's your housing organization. We're going to focus a little bit more on the organization side than the interpersonal side, although of course, and especially in cooperatives where you really do bring your whole self to the table and you have a voice and a vote, those are very intertwined. So that's kind of who the heck I am, why my passion, and why I'm here today. I would like to really just very briefly, many of you have been in my workshops before, so you know the drill, but I'm going to very briefly set up Safe Space, which is a set of ground rules that I use to help communities communicate well together. I am agnostic as to what your particular set of ground rules are. I am adamant that your community, whatever it is, should have ground rules. So these are the ones I use, and anytime you see a pink link like that, that's a link. You will be getting these slides, so you will be able to go and take a look at that as well. But the very, very high level for our conversation today is we're going to make sure we equalize the space, right? We're going to make space, we're going to take space, we're going to keep it confidential, we're going to share those lessons. We're going to check all of our assumptions at the door, right? We don't need them, they distort the data, so we're never going to assume something about somebody else or project something onto somebody else. We're going to own our knowledge and own our perspectives. We're going to understand that we all have the right to be human. Sometimes things are a little messy and sometimes things are imperfect and sometimes we send an intention and the impact is different, and that's all okay. We're going to give each other a little bit of credit to navigate that together, especially in this globally challenging moment when we're all feeling the human side of things. And lastly, consensual dialogue. We're going to have agreements about how we actually navigate the dialogue today. Gianna laid up some of those, right? We're all going to be on mute, how to use the chat, how we're going to handle it, how we're going to look and do things. And we're all going to support each other in navigating this space consensually and work together and collaborate on that. So that's my meta ground rules. I'm not going to go into them more deeply like I usually do because I want to be sensitive to our time. But if you are interested and you want to know more, I will, in this moment, copy that link location, drop it. Ooh, wrong computer. Hotkeys are different on this computer. Fantastic. Let me just really quickly go back to the chat. Oop, I can't see the chat. All right, we'll do it later. If Gianna or Raf, one of you could actually drop that into the chat, that would be magical because I am not able to see the chat anymore. I'll get to it later. Okay, so that's our ground rules today. And if you want to learn more, please, I do invite you to do so. The arc of our workshop today, we're going to talk. We're going to do an activity in just a second. We're going to talk some more. Then we're going to break into small groups and actually apply some of the learnings we've gained together, do a little bit of trouble solving, come back together, do a small debrief. There is a collaborative notes document, which we will also share in the chat momentarily, in which we're going to actually take the knowledge from your small groups, share them out with the whole group so that everyone has the benefit of that learning without using a whole bunch of airtime. And then we're going to have an option at the end to apply one of our knowledge tools that we've gained today. We're going to do a straw poll. We're either going to continue with Q&A if our conversation is really rich and developing and we want to stay there. Well, you'll be able to decide that we want to stay there. Or we have the option to move into small connection groups where we'll actually get together, do a little bit of connection building, some networking, do some offering, some asking, and support each other in actually achieving whatever next steps are most dear to your heart. So that's the arc of our agenda today. I would love to take this opportunity to just say, please, if you could, introduce yourself in the chat. I know who most of you are, but you don't know each other, and there's some people from very different worlds in here, so I really want to give you a chance to actually introduce yourself. So I would invite you to please, in the chat, introduce yourself with your name, whatever name you'd like, your pronoun, whatever preferred pronoun informs and inflects your gender today, and the answer to the question, if you were a spice or herb, what would you be and why? Real short, one sentence, name, pronoun, spice or herb, what would you be? And I'll model for us real quick as we're going. Sassy or Kate, whichever you prefer. I identify as either cisgendered female or genderqueer, depending on the week. You may use whatever pronoun you wish for me. I feel fine with that. And if I was a spice or herb, what would I be? Today, I would be probably toasted ground cumin because it is both savory and sweet, depending on how you use it. So that's what I would be. I invite y'all to throw that in the chat as well. And oh, look, now I can see the chat. So I'm going to be able to see what people say. We've got, let's see, lavender, calmness, we have cinnamon, we have lemongrass. Oh, this is delightful. I'm so excited about this. While folks are sharing that, I just want to share a couple of tips for how to have a smooth and human Zoom experience. I am sharing slides, so some of you may be seeing just a small column of videos on the side of your screen. Maybe you're only seeing one. have the ability to play with the slider in between the slide view and the video view. And you also have the ability to say gallery view or speaker view. I encourage you to play with those settings and see what is the most human-centered for you. Personally, I have you all right now on a big gallery and I can see about half of you. And for me, that really helps me connect more deeply to everyone who's here, and that allows me to have more meaningful and rich connections, which then supports better communication and faster decision-making. I encourage you to play with that for you, and whatever platform you're using for any of these, I encourage you to definitely find all of the features of those so that you can play with them and have different ways that you actually engage with that. Okay, but that's a lot of information we've definitely set up. We're gonna do our opening ritual now. So I'm seeing lots of awesome, amazing situations in the introductions. But we're gonna actually do a grounding ritual and an opening ritual, and we'll talk about the importance of opening and closing rituals in the arc of a good conversation in just a moment. But what we're gonna do right now is we're going to break into pair and shares. So I'm going to break us into groups of 2 or 3 people. We're going to take literally 3 minutes. I'm going to be rather sharp about timing. So if you're in 2, you each get a minute and a half. If you're in 3, you each get a minute. And I would like for you to please share in that small group with your video on, if at all possible. If you're calling in, please do unmute yourself. And you are all going to have the ability to unmute yourself in that small room. Please do share a moment of vulnerability or struggle and one moment of strength or hope that you've observed in your workplace or your community, whatever organization you're wanting to improve your communication practice in. Envision that place and talk about a moment of vulnerability, struggle, and strength or hope that you've seen recently. Does everybody understand what we're doing? Looking at the chat. Any questions in the chat? There's a lot in the chat. I'm going to rely on Gianna and Rafi to help me out with that. Okay, we're going to break into small groups. You're going to have this share. I'm going to bring you back in. We'll popcorn a little bit and move forward. That's what we're doing. And you should have gotten an invitation now to join that room. We'll see you in 3 minutes. All right, groups will be closed in 2, 1, and we're back. All right, we should have everybody popping back in now. Yes, so many humans back. All right, welcome back. Let me just make sure I can see your faces again. Oh, and all right. Okay, so welcome back. Thank you for going with that. Thank you for sharing. I can see that almost everybody wanted to stay in their conversations and didn't want to come back at all. So that's, fantastic. I'm a super big fan of that. If anybody would like to, normally at this point in a smaller meeting, when I have, between 5 and 25 people, this is the moment where I would say, hey, let's take ourselves off mute and popcorn out a few things that came. But unfortunately, fortunately, we have lots of folks here, so I don't want to divide the airtime up too much. I want to invite a few folks, anybody who would like to please go ahead and share an outcome, a moment of struggle, a moment of vulnerability, whatever that looks like for you. In the chat. I would love to hear just a few things that people shared. I would love to ground us in that as well. And then I can read a couple of those out as I see them pop in there. Excellent. I got to have a short conversation just in the main room that we were in. And I know that for me, I'll share one moment of hope that I saw this week is on the corner of my neighborhood. I and a few other people have made a free store, and that free store has been really, really, really active, and people are bringing things and keeping it neat and offering things, and that's been really quite inspiring, and it's been a moment of hope and strength for me in this. Okay, excellent. Unexpected challenges and changes, some volunteer staff life challenges, super real. Bridging a trust gap, having a third party to facilitate a communication and process. Well, that's a dear one to my heart. I'm a big fan of facilitation, as you may know. Excellent. I'm gonna let folks keep sharing those in the chat, and we're gonna move ourselves forward into the kind of meat and or potatoes and tofu of our conversation together today. And that's really, so we're gonna dig now into communication. So organizational communication, how does your company, group, house, whatever, talk to itself? How does your communication really work inside your organization? There are generally 2 buckets that you can break down organizational communication into. And that's either official or unofficial. So official communication is things like emails, digital communication platforms, like maybe you use Slack or Asana or Trello. Maybe you use newsletters as a way to kind of blast out across your organization, and also to the, for example, in just to use a food co-op as an example, you have your staff and you have your owners or your members. Perhaps you do communication officially across those different groups using newsletters, blast outs, etc. Meetings. One of the largest, most normal and sometimes not awesome communication method of an organization talking to itself. Of course, the notes from those meetings as well. And others, lots of different ways that communication happens officially in organizations, sanctioned, processed, etc. If you have other not named official processes unnamed, please do throw those in the chat. Then there's also, of course, unofficial communication pathways. Sometimes these can be even more robust and even more where the work happens in an organization than the official channels. And it's the kind of spectrum of official to unofficial and how that works out is different for every group. I will say that in cooperative and democratic organizations, the line between these is often very blurry. And they are very, very interpenetrated, and that can be to our benefit, right? That can be really great because you can have rich, data-driven, trust-filled conversations when you have a deep relationship. It can also have a downside. If your working relationship with another person is not the most awesome, maybe you're really different, maybe it's a little damaged, that can bleed over into your official processes as well. So it's a double-edged sword, and to be wise about where those are and what kinds of processes are official or unofficial can guide your trouble-solving process for, hey, what are we actually going to do to fix this particular problem? So unofficial processes of communication include social gatherings, other rituals or parties, maybe annual gatherings, celebrations, if you have a start the day ritual, if you have an end of shift ritual, all of those things inform things. Similarly, traditions, dinners, other meals, side channels, and interpersonal relationships and communications and connections. I bet you can all think of in that one workplace or in that one housing situation, you have the one or two people that you would go to first to get something done. And how often is that actually reflected in an organizational chart, right? So the real lines of collaboration and communication are not necessarily all the ones that are written down or officially sanctioned. It's often a constellation of all of those different things. So our question for today, and in this challenging and distanced and disrupted moment that we're finding ourselves in, is how do we transpose these different flavors of communication into distanced methods that still achieve the same ends? And that's really the big question that I've been trying to answer, and in my work, not of the co-op world right now, but bringing the co-op lessons to other parts of the world, managing a global community of chapters. That's really a lot of the experimentation work I've been doing over the last couple of years. And I'm really happy to not only take the co-op into that world, but bring that world into the co-op and some of those lessons. So let's talk a little bit about context for a second. What is really different right now, right? Because when you're saying it's distance, you're saying it's disrupted, how is a really important thing to answer, because then that is going to inform how you alter and transpose to meet that challenge. So what's really different about this moment, right? What's different logistically? You may be sharing space, you may not be sharing space. Are you an essential worker? Is your workplace defined as essential? Then you have a different kind of distance, whereas you may need to show up at your brick and mortar workplace, you may need to make those deliveries, you may need to serve those people, but you are all also needing to observe some best practices for social distancing and for hazmat safety, etc. We're all under more stress. Every single person on Earth right now is in a different baseline of stress, simply because we are aware that as a global community, we are undergoing challenge and change, right? And that is, as a baseline, a little more uncertain, which is a little more stressful, which is a little more heightened, which informs everything that we do, especially communication, because that's really layered on a baseline of our own psychological and physical safety and the amount of stress and chemicals we have in our body that regulate our ability to connect authentically, to communicate authentically, to work and to see each other. So that's just a new baseline that we're all operating in and under. And so that's different. There's also, of course, different organizational stresses. Are you able to continue operating? Do you have an income, personal, professional? Does your organization exist? Many cooperatives are small groups running close to the wire. Some of them are large, gigantically networked groups, yet also running close to the wire, because it's a complex and ever-evolving economic situation we find ourselves in. So there's a lot of context going on. Getting to know and zooming out a little bit on your particular context. What are the environmental, logistical, economic, emotional contexts that are really informing your group? Getting a little bit of an assessment of those is going to really help ground any pivots or any evolutions that you make in your processes in real specific knowledge. So it's really important to get that. I particularly, when I'm trying to think about how, in terms of communication, what are the things I really need to be paying attention to are how these differences affect and impact our ability to communicate well as people, right? We are people first, as coworkers and colleagues, right? We're collaborators second. And then perhaps in this specific case, as business owners, as those who are responsible to a larger organization, who have the, in the cooperative case, benefit and burden of co-ownership and co-governance of that space. So those are three different kind of hats you are wearing in this space. And thinking through how these differences impact each one of those hats and your ability to do that well can be a useful kind of lens to see what are the ways in which I need to be strengthened and supported, and what are the ways in which I need to show up and also be kind and gentle, right? So those are just some context that I think you can use to break things down. A little bit now about specific technologies and wise technologies for distance connection. There are so many webinars out there right now about how to use Zoom better, how to use X or Y or Z. And I'm like, wow, there's a lot of them. I watched 3 in the first week of COVID coming up, and then I was inundated by the flow and the deluge. So I'm not going to replicate all of those right now, but I'm going to give you a tiny bit of a survey of how to decide what kinds of technologies you may want to use in order to collaborate wisely with your colleagues, your community, etc. So there's I've kind of broken this into 4 general buckets of things that you want to be thinking of. First, of course, video conferencing. We are using Zoom. That is one of many. It seems to be doing pretty well in terms of it's got its functionality on lock these days, which is awesome, but there are many. So do a little survey, pick the ones that work for you. When you're thinking about video conferencing, look at the inbuilt tools and capacities, right? So what can you do in that room? For example, we just broke into small groups. That's really important as a functionality because we'll talk about this in a minute. You should never have too much talking head in a meeting. We don't like that when we're sitting around a table. Why would we like it when we're staring at a screen, right? So you definitely want to have different tools and processes to make sure that you're doing back and forth, that the conversation is flowing, that the talking stick is being passed. So think about what that looks like. And assess the different capacities built into the various different applications that you're looking at. And you will also especially need guidelines. Whatever platform you use, you're going to want agreements about cameras, have them on or off. Backgrounds, do we make sure that we're all using digital backgrounds, because then that has an equalizing effect for people who are in different socioeconomic situations, or people who may be living in different situations that have different levels of shame or awareness or authenticity around that. How do we use mute? What do we use the chat for? What do we think about interrupting each other, right? Are we cool to just talk over each other and break in when we need it? Is that normative for us and we're actually cool with that because maybe we all come from Jewish or Italian families? Or does that actually not work really well for us, right? And maybe we need to have some guidelines around how you can jump in and I can jump in. Maybe we have a hand signal for that. Maybe we use the hand or the thumb or something like that. Whatever it is, you need to come to agreement and have some basic guidelines for how you do this. And like, for example, one of my guidelines that I am very close to breaking is never have more than 15 minutes of talking at without breaking to talk with, right? Absolutely. Or Danny brings up, yeah, like different communication cultures, just make sure you're having consonants on whatever those are, right? So you'll notice that we did a parent share that broke up some talking. We're going to do group breakout. It's going to break up some talking. Otherwise, we're going to tend to zone out and disengage, and then our decisions and communication are going to be less robust. So whatever tool you use, break down what you can do with it and how you're going to use it. That's the actual connecting, the container, the little box in the screen that we're going to be using to do this connecting if we're doing in-person meetings or in-person conversations. Then there's, of course, asynchronous conversation through chat tools, through email, through all these other things. That's a whole other realm of communication that is equally important, and you equally need to decide what tools and capacities and what agreements we're going to have for those. But we're going to focus kind of more on the in-person connection here for the rest of this time. So then, of course, there's visual work stuff, right? So normally, those of you who've been in my classes before, I'm a big fan of the flip chart. Lots and lots of writing, lots of putting things up visually, because I'm a kinesthetic learner. The act of writing helps me learn. The act of seeing helps other people learn. The act of talking helps other people learn. In this space, we're kind of, need some help on the how do we do the digital board situation. So there's a lot of different tools out there to do that. The kind of, as one of my friends who I believe is on this call says, the moving post-its part of the thinking, right? Here's, how do we do this visual brainstorming? I put a few just that I have run across and happen to like. So there's Mural, which is a visualization tool. There's also Miro, which is a kind of moving post-its whiteboard tool. And then there's also Prezi or other things like that, which are short video presentation tools. I'm actually a really big fan. Instead of all coming together to get on a Zoom or get on a video call again and again and again, I don't know about y'all, but I've got a lot of Zoom in my life right now, and it actually is fairly exhausting because my brain is trying to pick up on a bunch of cues that I can't get because we aren't in the same room, right? I'm trying to get bodily cues. I'm trying to get additional data from you, and I can't because we're through a box, and that's exhausting on a level. So rather than having continuous stream of let's get in a room together and have a conversation, there is some benefit to just saying, you know what, I'm gonna record what I'm doing, what I have to say, or I'm gonna record my perspectives and my thoughts. Everybody in the meeting is gonna do that. It's gonna be 2 minutes each. We're gonna send it out before the meeting. That cuts 15 minutes off of our meeting, right? And you can do that asynchronously. You can do that on your own time. You can review it and later. So there's different tools for helping you flex how much time and energy you're spending transmitting to each other in the same room and asynchronously. Prezi is one interesting tool for that. I'm actually experimenting with it right now. Maybe working, may not. I invite you to experiment. Then there's additional things like polls and voting. For cooperatives, this is particularly important. We're gonna dive really deeply into this next week, but really quickly, it's really important to have polls and voting in a Zoom room or in a physical room. All the ways you want to always have a fast way to actually get a sense of what people in the room are thinking on a proposal, on a direction, on a conversation, on the process that we're engaging in right now. Please do make sure that you have some tool at your disposal, even if it's just, I can see everyone and we will use a thumb. Whatever it is, make sure that there is some way for you to have a tool to assess people. There's two tools that I want to just highlight really quickly. We'll dig more again in next week, but Poll Everywhere is a tool that I've run across a few times. It allows for anonymous polls. If you're attempting to really have an anonymized feedback session or a brainstorming session, you can upvote and downvote people's submissions. You can have rules around how you submit. And that can be really powerful if you're attempting to make sure that you're doing an equalizing moment. For example, if you have a lot of differences of power in your room, and there are some folks with a lot of institutional power and privilege and some folks with a lot less institutional power and privilege. If you do not do some work to leverage and balance those, you will end up replicating those differences of power in your dialogue. So anonymizing submissions to perhaps a high stakes topic or a non-routine brainstorm, anonymizing that can actually help leverage that playing field. There's a lot of other things you can do to do that, but leveraging that playing field is absolutely crucial in your dialogue, or you, again, will just end up replicating the systemic injustices and inequalities that we're kind of all swimming through. So polls and anonymized polls and voting tools like that can be one way that you work on that. And then of course there's Lubio, which has been way out the gate for a long time. It's a democratic decision-making tool created by a democratic decision-making collective that actually grew out of Occupy Wall Street, fascinatingly, in the Occupy movement. We're gonna dig deep on that next week, so I won't say more, but that's a really interesting tool to do different kinds of voting and decision-making collaboratively online together. And it's actually been around for quite a while, so they've been testing it and working out a lot of the bugs. And then lastly, rituals. Rituals. Those are technology. We don't need a computer or electricity to have a technology. A ritual is a technology. Just because we have computers and we have all these digital connective capacities does not mean that actually we should jettison any of the previous technology, right? When an iPad came along, I did not throw out all my paper. So please do use the rituals that you have. So that may include opening and closing prompts. You'll notice we modeled one today. We're going to be modeling a closing prompt. Your voting processes that you have, your other processes of communication that you use in your meetings. Don't jettison them because you're not in a room together. Adapt them. Also games. Big fan of games. I just learned an adaptation of a in-person dice rolling game, kind of a little bit like a truth or share type situation that was adapted into a Zoom space by using a digital dice roll. It was really fun. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you can actually play with inserting games. And those of you that have taken my Games for Cooperative Communication class may already be thinking of different ways we could apply some of those games. And boy, is that a conversation I'd love to have with y'all later. Is how can you bring games into the space, make it fun, making it engaging, and of course, food. I had a lovely meeting this last week that was actually a lunch meeting with everybody, and what we all did is we had a coordinated potluck, Everybody cooked their favorite dish and brought that for their lunch to the table of the conversation. And the first half hour of our meeting was actually sharing food together and, you know, sharing the recipes and talking about when we made it and how we made it. And that was actually really, really grounding and helped set us up for the conversation we were going to have, which was about conflict resolution, really, really successfully, because we had taken time to break bread together beforehand. Even though it wasn't together, it was together. So rituals, use them. Don't lose them. Really quickly, and I'm breaking my own rule about 15 minutes because I do tend to go on. I'm not going to go through this really, really deeply because you're going to get these slides again, but just one example, meetings that rock, the arc of a great meeting and the roles of a great meeting, right? So I'm not going to go this through in really deep detail. I'm just going to blow through it really fast. Always make sure you have an opening. It should, you know, and the details here of why you should do each of these things. Then you should have some section of reports, updates, headlines that grounds you. Maybe you have a consent agenda, some way to pass batches of non-controversial, routine, but nevertheless votable approval items in groups. Then, of course, your agenda. Breaks. Use them. They are very important. Do them together. Do a 2-minute yoga session. Do a 2-minute dance party. Whatever you need. Make sure that you're actually moving your body and mind in a regular way. And then, of course, more creative process ideas like a blue sky forum where you reserve 15 minutes to just the craziest ideas you can think of that are relevant to the work, bring them in, make them happen. And then, of course, closing. I'm a big fan of reflective rituals like lightning round checkouts, which many of you have done with me. And if you haven't already, we're going to do it at the end of this call. And then, of course, roles in a great meeting. Facilitator, you need someone who's leading the game. It can rotate. It can be a different person. You just need someone who's leading it that day. The scribe, recording what you're doing, especially important in a digital situation. We need that concrete touch point. The environment person, sometimes this is called the food person, sometimes it's called the fluffer, it's the hospitality, it's the mistress. There's so many words for this. Someone who is setting the space. In digital, that's especially important and also especially challenging. I'm working on ways right now that I can do more to set the space. One group I saw that did this very successfully was they distributed, there was one person in charge of distributing pictures, like a suite of 20 pictures for backgrounds for their calls that they would use. And it was always a different game of what was the theme this week and what are we going to be doing and is it going to be fun? And they were amazing. The Studio Ghibli one was my absolute favorite week there. And then, of course, there's more different creative roles for every group, like Vibes Watcher, your experts, your skeptic. My favorite role. The skeptic role is the only job of the skeptic, and it rotates every meeting, is to poke holes in every proposal to make sure that you're not falling into groupthink. Super important role. Absolutely one of my favorite. You get a silly hat to wear with it, it's even better. So those are some of the ideas for meetings that rock and don't suck. And again, we could talk about this for days. This is in fact a whole class I teach, but that's a kind of a little flavor, a taster, an hors d'oeuvre. Okay, we're only 2 minutes behind schedule, so I'm a big fan. Let's actually move into our group breakouts. So what we're gonna do here is we're going to actually break into small groups of between 4 and 6-ish. What I'm gonna ask you to do in that group is you're going to select a scenario as a group. You're gonna use your collaborative communication tools to do that selecting. You're going to be conscious of airtime. You're going to share the space. You're going to make suggestions. You're going to have asks and offers. It's going to be awesome. You're going to select either a communication situation that could have gone better. So maybe one of you's like, hey, we had a situation happen recently. Let's break it down. I'm going to offer it to the group to deconstruct. Or you're going to plan for an upcoming communication, maybe a meeting that's coming up. Maybe it's a proposal you need to workshop. Maybe it's a celebration you want to do. You're going to plan for an upcoming communication moment that's going to rock. It's not going to be okay. It's going to be awesome. You're going to plan for that. All right. And you're going to share these details. You're going to workshop it. You're going to trouble solve the situation. Okay. So you're going to select that scenario. The first thing you're going to do, though, as you select that scenario, is you're going to select a scribe from your group. That scribe is going to go into the shared notes doc, which I'm hoping has been dropped into the chat and could maybe be dropped in again right now. So if you're able to, and if you're on a phone or if you're on a smartphone and you're not able to, you are probably not a good candidate for Scribe. But if you're able to and you have a computer, go ahead and open that Google Drive, that Google Doc, and that Scribe is going to select whatever group you're in and is going to take notes on what your scenario is, if it's all right with the people in that group, who the participants are, so that we can say, track as we all share this notes doc, oh my God, that one group with that one person who had that one idea, I want to connect with them later. You're going to take notes on that, and then you're going to share your key points. So your scribe is going to do participants, scenario, and key points. And those are all going to be shared in that Google Doc. Leon, thanks for sharing. You just on it. Leon is a great asset. Anybody who's on this call who doesn't know this man, you just need to know this man. Questions that I want you to think on in that group. Again, whatever learning arrives in the room is correct, but some things to prompt your thinking is, what were the barriers to effective communication in this situation? What are the consequences of that poor communication? How might more effective communication, what would have resulted in? What would have been different if you'd done it differently? What was the desired difference that you're aiming for? And then, of course, how could you have set the group up to succeed in this either coming awesome situation or the one that was in the past? So those are some kind of prompts to share. Danny, great question. Can I share these instructions in the breakout room? Great question. I am unfortunately not able to do that in Zoom's current functionality, which is believe you me, I have emailed them about that. What I do invite you all to do is, if you can, either take a screenshot right now from your computer to see, hey, this is what we've got, and then at least if everybody takes one, or if most people take one, you'll have one in your room. I will, of course, I will blast them out as well. Daniel, fabulous suggestion. Let's raise the questions into the shared doc. So I will make sure that happens as soon as I've populated you into the rooms, and maybe Rafi and Gianna can put that in with me right now. Just copy and paste what you've got on this slide right into there. And if you don't have it, I'll make sure you get it to you. Yes.
We are working on it.
Amazing. Co-opers make the dream work. God, I love being part of this community. Okay, does anybody have a question about what we're doing? Anybody unclear about our process? Okay, I'm looking at faces, going to look at some more faces, looking for visual cues. Got some thumbs up, got some nodding, need some tea faces. Awesome, into it. All right, I'm going to recreate our rooms and make sure that we have rooms of 4 to 6 people. So here I go, making sure that we've got the right amount of people in a room. Awesome. Oh, this is great. We're going to have nice, dense conversations. Okay.
So really quickly, Sassy, somebody already dropped a screenshot of the instructions into the shared outcomes doc. So thank you to who is moving faster than Raph and I.
Yes. Awesome. I love it. See what's happened. See what happens when you empower people with knowledge, skills, tools, and frameworks. That's amazing. Awesome. And people are also discovering how it does and doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to open the rooms. Y'all are going to go in. We are going to spend 8 minutes in these rooms. We're going to spend 8 minutes, and we're going to have a really rich discussion. I will announce to you, hey, we've got half the time. Hey, you got 2 minutes. Hey, you come on. But be conscious of your airtime. And then we're going to all come back together. Going to do a little share out, do some Q&A, and then vote on our next steps. We good? All right, here we go. You should now have been invited. See you in 8 minutes. Oh, yes, and here we all come back together. Amazing. So I've stopped sharing my screen so that I can see your faces better. Welcome back, everybody. We could talk forever. I know I jumped into a couple of rooms. Boy, was there some awesome conversations going. I just want you to be able to talk forever. So actually, we are going to focus on doing that. So this time was for Q&A and also report backs. We're going to focus on report backs. So what I would love for process for all of us is one person from every group. I nominate your scribe. Scribes, if you accept that nomination, please put your name in the chat with your group number so that we can then selectively unmute you. And if scribe, you do not accept the nomination, please do nominate someone else from your group who you believe would be comfortable doing that report out. And then we're going to really quickly just have 1 minute per group just to share out the highlights. I'm looking at the document. That's amazing. I think the only group that wasn't able to enter some things was group 2. To know if y'all were just so caught up in the conversation or if you had a technological issue. I invite you to go in there and add more details in there in a moment. But let's take this moment to kind of actually do some share the airtime and have some folks actually speak out. So I see one person in the chat so far. To my last group, your local yoga dealer. I love everything about that statement. Okay, awesome. As folks come in, let's just go in asynchronous order. So this is popcorn style, Zoom style. So Matthew Epperson, can we unmute Matthew?
Yes, he is unmuted.
Magical. Tell me in 1 minute or less, tell me about your group, Matthew. Hi.
Awesome. Hello. Yes. So Sala brought up the scenario, real life scenario of working with a startup food co-op that is receiving or giving out produce boxes, crop boxes is what they call them. And they had an issue of like trying to bring in more COVID-19 precaution to their produce box pickup. Had an issue with like folks getting, not social distancing, not physical distancing, excuse me, getting too close to each other, too close to the tables. Had a situation where it was kind of unclear. So Sala ended up in this position of having to kind of yell and like was using her finger to like try to point and like say like you separate from you. So like it felt kind of demeaning in some ways to folks, and there was negative feedback from members who had experienced that. So we talked about ways to kind of like have more role clarity in the future, have maybe like an ambassador who's taking charge of like communicating, making sure we have adequate signage before we start, really good social media before we start so that folks have more clarity coming into it, utilizing some amount of peer pressure so that we're keeping each other in check about like what we all need to be doing. And I think that was it. Thank you.
Magic. Love it. Good timing. Well freaking done. Excellent modeling. I appreciate you. I mean, yeah, that's a real challenge. So not just, hey, this is not we're all in a meeting or we're collaborators or communicators. This is your stakeholder group, your customers, right? And how are you communicating with them well as well? Because they're absolutely a stakeholder. Magic. Moving swiftly forward. Jeff from Group 8. Can we, so Matthew, go ahead and mute yourself again. You should have that power. Thank you. Jeff, can we unmute the Jeff Novin?
Of course. Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm representing Group 8. We took a real life-ish scenario where an employee that was funded by a grant at our small nonprofit grocery store that is currently closed for our storefront had not exhausted their grant funds, but was at the end of their term. And we're facing a situation in which if they chose not to continue, then those funds could be returned to our operational account. So the question is, do we try and stay on with this person and continue with their term as a staff member, or do we continue to try and get as much cash as needed for the organization to be able to reopen? And so ultimately, yeah, it's probably a tricky personnel issue that a lot of folks are dealing with right now. We had a lot of great conversation in our group. Ali really brought up a lot of this balance between how do we prioritize the situation of the individual and their particular resources and the organizations. Brent was talking about how do we look at different timelines and think about what other resources could be available to that person. And Jeannie was talking about, yeah, the real emotionality of this conversation and how to bring in our full selves to that conversation. This was something that was going to happen, but the person and our organization ended up getting another opportunity. But yeah, it was really, I think, a conversation about how do we balance the individual and how do we balance the organization. I encourage folks that are in my group to put more in the chat if they feel relevant.
Magic. Yes, that is a dynamic that a lot of organizations we're all dealing with right now, and all of the complications around that. Great share. I'm going to pause for just a second because we have reached the top of the hour, and I'm going to model being extremely time conscious. However, we did reserve another 15 minutes for this time, just intuiting that we would likely have such rich conversations that we wanted to continue them. So if anybody does need to leave right now, thank you so much for your presence, and I empower you to take care of your own boundaries and your own body and your own needs. If people would like to stay, we are going to use a straw poll really quickly in this moment to decide what we're going to do with this next 15 minutes. The options are, and I'm going to really quickly just share my screen again so that we can see, for those of us who are visual learners, what that is. I'm not going to bother making it big because we got that. So the last option right now, we are either going to break into small networking connection groups, which is an option that some people brought forward, or we're going to stay with this conversation and do more rich share outs and do more talking to each other in the whole group. So that's the options. For the break into small groups, that'll be kind of like the small groups we were just in, but those are going to be for networking and collaboration. You're going to be asked to say, here's who I am, what I'm asking, what I'm wanting, what I can offer to the group. And that's kind of the connection group option. Or we're going to stay with this whole group and continue in this process of share outs and collaboration and learning from each other. That's the two options, right? So we're going to ask you to find your little interaction icon, or use your physical hands. And we're going to do a straw poll right now. A straw poll, for those of you who don't know, is a non-binding vote. So it's a non-binding vote that helps the group see from each other where you're at right now in terms of how you want to govern your time together. So if you had a hand up or a thumb up or whatever, put it up and keep it up. So thumbs up for more of our continued report out, and clapping hand, either jazz hands or find the clapping hand for moving into connection groups. Excellent. Oh, and someone has actually raised their hand. We were wondering if that functionality was going to be good. Okay, so put them up and keep them up. Right now, I'm going to look at everybody's faces. Keep them up. We've got, okay, one. I'm going to count thumbs. Gianna, count hands. Rafi, back us up. I'm counting thumbs. Ooh, okay. Great. Okay, that 1, 2. There's a hand.
How do you vote without video? I don't know.
4. If you vote without video, you throw it in the chat or let me know. What do you want? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Ooh. Okay, good. This is awesome. This is good voting. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, I'm counting about 15 abstentions and 17 thumbs. What have we got on the clapping hands count? Has anybody got a count for clapping hands?
We have 5 clapping hands.
5 clapping hands. All right. There we have it. So the thumbs have it. Clapping hands. I'm a big fan. I would absolutely be very excited about having more connection groups, and I have about 15 minutes after that extra 15 minutes. I'm okay staying on for more time if you're okay staying on for more time, but let's go with the will of the group and continue on with the share outs and kind of a more question and answer, more kind of bringing that in. Thank you to everybody who, yes, darling, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in really quick. If you do have to leave, please complete our evaluation, which is in the chat. We will repost it one more time, but we greatly appreciate your feedback, especially in anticipation of next week's part 2 of this training, which is coming up on the 27th, same time, same place, 11 a.m. on Zoom. And then also we are going to be posting a link to a Google form. Some folks have had the opportunity to connect with maybe folks they hadn't previously known prior to this call. So if you would like to remain in contact, you can submit your contact information and we will distribute that only to the people that have shared their information. So we're going to be dropping that in the chat as well.
Definitely. And if there's someone on this call that you think would have been into that and you happen to know them and they jumped off already, feel free to share that with them. It's an opt-in consent-based situation, but we want to make sure everybody is empowered to connect as they want to. Okay, rock on. We've got 10 more minutes in our time clock. We're going to respect our time. Let's keep going with the share out. So when we broke off, we had just heard from group 8, and that was the delightful Jeff Novin. Who is up next? I saw in the chat, A. Byers from group 10. Can we unmute you? Rafi, yeah, I see you. Hold on. Rafi's going to get to you. We're going to unmute you in just a second. And
Okay,
there you go.
Hello.
Share away, my friend.
Okay, so I was with Margaret and Francis and Dharmishta. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. And so the scenario was what Margaret is actually going to be doing, which is a financial training session, which is like co-op development training online. So she doesn't normally do it online. There's roughly about 20 people. It's dry material, so that already is a barrier that she has adapted for in-person training. So now it's about how to how to compensate in an online environment. So we brainstormed about her kind of doing a new kind of prep work and learning about Zoom in general, and maybe trying to make the group smaller than 20 so that you don't have to do breakout sessions and it can just be a more intimate thing, because it seemed like 4 of us it worked really well in being engaged and talking to each other. But that there might be a barrier in that as well. And then also ways to asking the participants, like what you had said, Sassy, around them bringing in something about their financial situation so that they could share that to like in a Prezi or something, to where there's like, hey, this is my circumstance. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Love it. Thinking through the dynamics and the training and how the things work. Group, whole group, soul group, all lots of really great learnings. That's fantastic. Thanks for that, Byers. We're going to move forward to Rick. Rick, who has still got his hand raised and magically found that functionality when we didn't think it existed. Can we unmute Rick from group 6?
Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, I think I have the hand raised because maybe because it's no video, or maybe because I'm on Linux.
I love these theories. These are great. Share what your group talked about.
All right, so we really only had time to talk about one situation, and so that's my group, it's I am not a participant in, well, I belong to a credit union, but I'm not a cooperative worker. But I chose to talk about my DSA chapter, in which we're learning how to move work forward. And so we have a lot of members and the leadership who are not very, don't have a lot of these skills. And so the conclusion was that facilitation skills would be like really helpful to us in terms of being able to capture like ideas and then move them forward, like break them down and help, you know, multiple people be able to work on work and be accountable.
Got it. Yeah, and really quickly for those who don't know, what is a DSA chapter?
Democratic Socialists.
Democratic Socialists. Awesome. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, thinking through leadership and how that works and how that doesn't work. Awesome. I love it. That's
thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And just to go back into order, I skipped over our random order. Kelly from Group 7, let's hear a little bit from you, and then we probably got time for one more group before I want us to actually do our closing ritual so that we have time to model that as well. So, yeah,
we went through a scenario. Is it Alana or Elena? She's a director of 2 co-ops in Northern California, normally have weekly meetings, and at the management level, they've been meeting on Zoom every week, and that's been working really well. But meeting with the staff is really a challenge. And technology is a big issue for a lot of folks. Even just accessing email is not reliable. And so some of the ideas, and I feel this, both being someone with, in a rural internet situation, which is not awesome. And then, and just, trying to manage the technology. And so some of our suggestions were to just really embrace the low tech.
Yeah.
If that embrace the thing that everyone can do. And then, and think about, instead of different ways to structure it. So maybe it's breaking staff up into smaller groups and do check-ins with those groups first. And maybe there's a shorter, larger group check-in. Sometimes conference call etiquette can be a challenge. So maybe that's an initial conversation about what some of that etiquette is, and understanding that it will be a learning process. And then someone had the suggestion that of assigning, or requesting that different people host different parts of the calls. So that's not just listening and with the same facilitator every time. But yeah, I definitely, in groups that I work with a lot of framing groups, and this notion of trying to use lots of different technology platforms is just, it's overwhelming. So we're going about as low tech as we can go and feel like we can still all talk to each other.
Absolutely. Embracing so one of the rules of accessibility is you go to the capacity of the lowest common denominator in terms of like what is actually the person who is the most diminished in their capacity to connect, what is the person who is most perhaps marginalized. In this situation, a rural situation where that broadband cooperative hasn't reached you yet, we're still going to build that, it's still going to get to you, but it's not there yet. Definitely figure out what is the lowest tech you can go and still achieve your goals. And if you have a low tech, how do you fit your goals to that? And how can you use places with more capacity to empower pieces with less? I'm going to share one tiny story that's sparking for me. I was once advising a cooperative that had both the digital divide was really real for them. Some folks had a lot of access to technology, some folks really did not. They also had a generational divide in that some of the younger folks were really, it felt easy as digital natives, and some of the older folks really felt alienated and disincluded by emphasis on technology. And we ended up actually creating a hybrid structure for them that included aspects of a phone tree, digital buddies, and also a process for making decisions that included 3 different kinds of technology, including a digital poll, a video conference, and a phone call. So we created a process for them that made them actually feel included. And it was a hodgepodge and it was a hybrid, and you know what? It worked, right? So whatever works for your group, that is the right solution. It doesn't have to be a particular solution. If it is working, if it is inclusive, if it is functional, that is what you should be doing. So I love that you brought those into the room. That's fantastic. I think that we have time for just one more share, and then we're going to move toward our closing, and then we're going to release everyone back into your day. So I've absolutely lost in the chat. Who is up next? Looks like we've got Rick, we had you. Charlotte from group 5. Charlotte, are you here? Can you share? There you are.
Here. Okay, well, our group included Naja, Alex, Danny, Mark, and Jamie. We made a mistake actually from poor communication right at the front, where we decided that we would identify a new program that wasn't, you know, a situation wasn't there, where we had to create the scenario so we knew what next to do. So we ended up going back to a combination of a real situation where there's new members in the cooperative and not everyone knows what's going on, and they're meeting in the large groups, and so they're ineffective and not very efficient, and so there hasn't been onboarding. And then it turned out, instead of a lot of brainstorming, we actually had in our group someone that their cooperative is actually excelling, where they're getting more grants right now because they are utilizing technology and, you know, it's breaking out the work requirements, creating calendar events using Facebook, and they're actually more effective and efficient during this time than they were before. So we had the tale of two different types of cooperatives. So we didn't, like I said, but it was funny that because we didn't have the scenario, we didn't move very fast right at the beginning.
How meta, I love it. Absolutely, but kind of leaning into which one is excelling and how that's actually working forward. I love that. That's really great shares. Thank you so much for that. Okay, thank you everybody else who volunteered to share. We're at time, so I'm gonna rely on your excellent note-taking in the doc. Please do go in there and add any insights that you weren't able to get in the first round. Housekeeping on that, I am going to make sure that what we have in the chat, the relevant and salient points, are going to get into that shared collaborative notes doc. We're going to clean that up, and so that will be a record of all of our time together, and will also be paired with these slides. So don't worry if you weren't in a taking notes space. It's all going to be there. You're all going to have it. I do want to encourage everybody again to take a moment, either in this moment or in 1.5 minutes, to fill out that evaluation. That is super important, and in fact, usually I recommend that your group, especially in this moment of transition, you have your own self-evaluation ritual to make sure that y'all are all continuing to be on the same page of continuous improvement, right? Nobody gets it all right the first time. You notice how we mess up some things today, right? That's okay. In fact, it's normal. If you didn't mess anything up, I would be concerned, because that means somebody's not saying something. So make sure you have a process for that continuous improvement. And I want to offer us now, as the last thing we do, lightning round checkouts. We still have too large of a group to take up airtime to do it, so I'm not going to get to hear your lovely voices, but I want you to, in the chat, and I will be sharing both the intros and this closing ritual in our shared notes document. I would like to invite everyone to, as our closing ritual, do a thing I call lightning round checkouts. Many of you are familiar with it. Those of you who aren't, here's the ritual. In a group of 5 to 15, it takes literally 2.5 minutes. It is one of the best things you can do as the last thing in the meeting. It closes, it grounds, it reflects back to the group how you went, and it brings the group back into consonance so that you can move forward into the next thing. What I would like you to share are 2 things, literally 2 words, just 2 words, hyphens maybe, but I'm pushing you to synthesize here, flex that skill. 2 words, the first thing, something that you learned today or that moved you in our conversations, and the second thing, just how you're feeling right now. Okay, so first thing is something that you learned or that moved you, and then a comma, and then how you're feeling right now. 1 word each. I'll model for us, and then we can all share that in the chat, please, as we can. And if you're not able to share it in the chat, please, throw it in the Google Doc or let me know. One thing that I learned today is humility. Great conversations that inspired humility in me, and how I'm feeling right now. Jazzed. Feeling pretty good. I really love my job. I absolutely love supporting cooperative communication. I love working with people, and I got to do my job today. And so I'm feeling jazzed. So thank you all for that. I'm going to raise just a couple of closing rituals with my own voice in proxy for you. So I see skeptic, the role, and connected, collaboration, inspired. We have a hyphenated breadth of experience shared and inspired. We have ritual and full, cadence, engaged, games, and growth minded, positive culture, and that matters. So many amazing things. Continue to share, please. And I want to just say thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for investing in yourself and in your community. Thank you for staying in this moment with us. Thank you for staying in the struggle that we're all sharing as a global community right now. Keep yourself safe. Keep yourself sane. Wash your hands. Do your best to physically distance. Collaborate to keep your community safe. And just keep on keeping on. And thank you for doing you. And if you'd like to, I'm going to invite us to wave, or if maybe our Raph could take us all off mute, we can all just shout out real quick. Hi, bye. Good to see you, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sassy.
Welcome.
Love you, Sassy.
Love you so much. So good to see you. Oh,
Never miss your
no, you're at
workshops.
every class.
I was not going to miss this one either.
You are my biggest fan, and I'm a fan right back. Oh.
Hey, I just love being a part of being involved and listening to cooperators.
Yes, me too. Share that with you, Jeff. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks all. So let's close it on down. Thank you for being here. Stay safe.